Hello and welcome to Water, Poems by Rumi with Haleh Liza Gafori and Maya C. Popa. We are delighted to have you all joining us tonight at the Stavros Niarchos Foundation Library. My name is Jackie Trailis, and I am a member of the programs team here at SNFL. Before we start, I would like to thank the Stavros Niarchos Foundation for making programs like this evening's possible. I would also like to remind you that if you don't already have a library card, it is easy to get one by visiting any information desk in this building. Finally, I would like to encourage you to visit NYPL's website and take a look at upcoming 7 Stories Up programs like this one. We have an excellent lineup this season featuring new fiction, nonfiction, music, local history, and more. We would love to have you join us in this space again. And now let me introduce our speakers for tonight. Haleh Liza Gafori is a New York-born performance artist, translator, vocalist, poet, and musician of Iranian descent. Her acclaimed book of translations, Gold, Poems by Rumi, was published by New York Review Books in 2022, and her second volume, Water, is being released today, April 22nd, 2025. A 2024 MacDowell Fellow and a recipient of a 2023 NISCA grant, Gafori has created a musical and cross-media performance based on her translations and has presented her work via performances, lectures, and workshops across the country. Dr. Maya C. Popa is most recently the author of Wound is the Origin of Wonder, named one of the Guardian's best books of poetry, and a finalist for the Levi's Reading Prize. American Faith was a runner-up in the Catherine A. Morton Prize, judged by Ocean Vuong, and was awarded the North American Book Prize in 2020. She is previously the author of 3 chapbooks published in the US and the UK. Popa is the Poetry Reviews editor of Publishers Weekly and teaches poetry at NYU. Her newsletter, Poetry Today, is one of Substack's best-selling literature publications. She works closely with established and emerging writers through Conscious Writers Collective, her online writing platform and community. Without further ado, please welcome Haleh Liza and Maya.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Jackie. Thank you, New York Public Library. Thank you all for being here today. I appreciate your presence, and this is actually my first official reading of Water, and it just came out today. So it's interesting because I've been, working with Gold for 3 years now, and I know that book like the back of my hand, and now this is a new book, and this is a new sort of, the art of recitation and the experience of speaking poems aloud is a whole other experience. And I'm very, very pleased to be launching into it in this room and here today. So anyway, thank you. And I'll start with sun in the heart. Sun in the heart. Sun in the soul. The sun in the sky pales before you. Sun in the heart, sun in the soul, fill the house with light again. Fill our friends with joy, blaze in the eyes of enemies, blind them till they see. Rise over the mountains. Ripen the grapes, make rubies out of stones, sun in the sky, sun in the heart, doctor, beacon, take our hands, use our hands, cure the ill and ailing. Make the gardens green again, adorn farm and flower with every fruit and meadow. Criminal to let clouds hide you. Sun in the heart, unveil your face and brighten our dim world. And speaking of our dim world of water and mud, he says. And when he speaks of the donkey here, the donkey in Persian literature and Persian folklore and Persian poetry is a symbol of ignorance. And in the context of Sufi mysticism and Rumi's poetry, the donkey is the one that hasn't awakened to love, really. And when he says, I am a child and love is my teacher, waking me from ignorance, right? That's from Gold. He says, I am a child and love is my teacher, waking me from ignorance. So here we'll meet the donkeys for a moment in this poem. World of water and mud, ever since I've known you, I've known trial, torment, and tribulation. You are a pasture for grazing donkeys, not the abode of Jesus. What am I doing in a pasture for grazing donkeys? Why am I here? World of water and mud. You tied my hands and feet. Why? So I notice my hands and feet, so I cherish them, untie them, meet my liberator. Only when the feast was spread did you pour the fresh water. Only when the feast was spread did we taste the sweet water. Only when the feast was spread did we taste the sweet water. World of water and mud, God called you a cradle. Infant blossom, how do you mature so fast? The breeze touches me and I open, petals fall, fruit ripens. While here I am, lifting my arms like a tree to the sky, praising the one who made the sky, but why insist on above and below? When my source dwells in every here and every there, why insist on above and below? Why raise my arms praising the one who made the sky when my source dwells in every here and every there? Why ask where of the everywhere? Turn off the mind, turn off the tongue, enter nothingness, see things through nothing's eyes. So you see, this is an interesting and strange poem. He starts out with this declaration of what's going on here. What is going on? Is this boot camp for the soul? What are we doing here? And in so many of his poems, you know, he says poppies, basil, and this tulip's stunning eyes are here. He praises what's here. He asks us to praise what's right here. And every once in a while, he's like, what the hell is going on here? You know, so in this poem, he begins with this question, right? What are we doing here? And this movement, you know, why do you tie my hands and feet? Why? So I notice my hands and feet, so I cherish them, so I meet my liberator. And then he moves into the sweet water, and then he moves into this notion of the source being everywhere, and then he moves into the notion of quieting the mind and entering nothingness, the luminous void that the Sufis speak up of all the time. You know, he says in another poem in this book, speaking of the emptiness or the nothingness or the void as being the sort of place from which, well, it's the place from which all emerges, right? So in some people in Sufi mysticism call the void God, because it is out of that from which everything emerges. And of course, he also calls God the shoreless, boundless sea of love. So all of these things can be true at once. What are we tapping into at a moment? What are we? What part of our imagination are we activating in the connection with the divine, right? And we'll get to a poem where he really dives into that, because the divine is unfathomable. It's beyond our five senses. So our imagination must be activated in order to engage with it. And that's not diminishing it. That's actually, you know, celebrating the intimate relationship. Right? No, really, though, it's really true. It's really true. Anyway, it says, last night in my dreams. Last night in my dreams, I saw my emptiness. I saw my hunger. Last night in my dreams, I saw my hunger. I saw my need. I saw an emptiness only God can fill. Enchanted by the perfection of this poverty, I nearly fainted. Enchanted by its beauty, I lay awestruck till dawn. This poverty is a mine of rubies. Its red glow drapes me in silk. Sanakaye, Sanakaye, Sanakaye tu mayakoe. Garso ati ببری ز اندیشه ها چه باشد قوطی خوری چو ماهی در بر ما چه باشد چه باشد قوطی خوری چو ماهی در بر ما چه باشد. Why are you ravaged by a single thought? Dragged down, sinking inward, heavy with sorrow. Piece by piece, I stitched you together. Why has one doom-ridden thought torn you into 100 pieces? Now we're trying to find the poem, right? Because this one's not memorized. So where in the world is it in the book? Where is it? Why ask where of the everywhere? Is it page 25? Oh, that's so great. Thank you. Yeah! Very good. Why? Why are you ravaged by a single thought, dragged down, sinking inward, heavy with sorrow? Piece by piece, I stitch you together. Why has one doom-ridden thought torn you into 100 pieces? Right? Here's the voice of God. This is the voice of God. You packed your belongings and left the kingdom of my love. Now you wander alone. I made the earth your cradle, but you won't relax. You lie there, cold and wooden, ill at ease. I unleashed water from stone. You marched off towards dry land. Now your heart is granite. Child of flesh and bone, you are a child of soul. Love is your trade, your mission, your job. Why do you busy yourself with so many other tasks? In one house, you were wounded 100 times. You keep circling that house. You keep eyeing the door. In another, you tasted 100 kinds of sweetness. You trusted none of them. Bitter. You never grew sweet. Dear one, dear one, dear one, I want to see you love drunk. If my words make you vigilant and wary, I'll say no more. Here I am, gazing at you in silence. Open your eyes to the love in my eyes. Drink it down. Beloved, when your sweetness rains down, the price of rock candy plummets. Seekers on a pilgrimage to see the house of God, where are you going? Where are you? Your beloved is here. Come back. Your beloved lives next door. Your beloved is right behind the wall. Why are you wandering round and round, lost in the desert? Look beyond form. Look into the faceless face of love. You are that love. You are the house, the dwelling place of love and its maker. You've traveled 10 times to see the house of God. You've described it in detail, all its exquisite features. If you saw the garden, where are the flowers? If you swam from God's sea, where is your soul's pearl? Tell me about the God inside. For once, enter your own house. Climb to the roof. Climb to the roof of your own house. Searching for treasure. You've endured so much trouble. Hear this truth. You are the treasure and the veil hiding it. نه آن شیرم که با دشمن برایم مرا این بس که من با من برایم نه آن شیرم که با دشمن برایم مرا این بس که من با من برایم چو خاک پای عشقم تو یقین دان که از این دل چون گل سوسن برایم از این آتش چو دودم من سراسر که تا چون دود از این روزن برایم منم طفلی که عشقم استاد است به نغزارد که من خودن برایم 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 برایم. Thank you. Tomorrow I'll visit love's tailor. My robe of longing, 1,000 yards long. My robe of melancholy, passions, entanglements, and infatuations. He snips at it. He snips away one lover, stitches in another. This seam might hold, this seam might split. I give my heart anyway. Watching his miraculous hands embroider silk on silk. Separation might tear my robe to shreds. His scissors might wound me. I know. I give my heart anyway. Amazed, I watch him add and subtract, preserve or erase memories, dyeing my thoughts with new colors. My heart is his slate. He scrawls down facts and figures, measurements and names. He multiplies me by another and proves what? 1 times 1 is 1? Dividing us, he rejoins us, scatters us in the sea. Every drop, one with the shoreless one. Every one of us, one with the shoreless one. Whether we are sum, product, quotient, or difference, no matter. His arithmetic, his algebra, always yields the same result. One, and only one. A marvel, shattering thought. And I love this movement from eros to agape in this poem, that he starts out, I go to the, tomorrow I'll visit love's tailor, my robe of longing 1,000 yards long. He stitches in one lover, snips at it. Well, this lover goes, that lover comes and goes. Hey, maybe sometimes stays forever. That's wonderful. Sometimes doesn't. But we really prioritize eros in this culture. Eros, 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 romantic love. Our notion of love is so tied up with specifically romantic love. And this philosophy is saying, you know what, that's great, but there's also many other kinds of love. And the love of the shoreless, boundless love from which we've emerged and which we are made. I mean, we are, and I always say it, there's no other way that 3 trillion cells could work so beautifully in harmony were it not for some force, and we can call it love. So this force that wants to live, this force that wants life, this love, this is another love, And so I love the way he moves from that to that in this poem. It's wonderful. Well, he's always trying to, liberate us in all different ways, And here's there's a lot of water in this poem. I don't know if I've read a lot of water yet, of the water poems, but here we go with an interesting water poem as I, again, look for the poems because I'm still figuring out where's the... Yeah, bookmarks are falling. The world's rivers stop flowing. Anybody have that page number? What's that? Thank you. Love it. I love it. 18. The world's river stopped flowing. Season of warm rains return. Make the river flow again. Let the river flow again. In the depths of the soul, there's a gushing spring, invisible to the eye. Love, the water of life, bubbles up from its depths, no end to it. Let love's spring feed the world's river. Where there is water, there is bread, my dear. But you can't squeeze water from bread. You are a guest on this earth, not a beggar. Don't trade the water of your soul for a morsel of bread. End to end, the whole material world is less than a single morsel. Greed for crumbs dries up the river. Greed for crumbs dries up the river. From a placeless place beyond earth and sky, the water of life flows. The sky, its pitcher, the earth, its cup, the source, a boundless ocean. Don't delay. Leap from the pond into the ocean again and again. There, the fish is immortal. The ocean, the vision of that boundless ocean restores light to our eyes. Its waters run down the rooftop, flow through the spout, and feed the garden, our faces, the blooming flowers. Dates from the garden's palms nourish the unborn Savior inside the Holy Mother, inside of you. At sea in that ocean, you find ease. You find joy, and the frantic watchman in you, shaking his rattle and banging his stick, falls silent. Boundless waters guard the fish. I like that poem. And that beautiful 2 minutes. Okay, that beautiful vision of the divine. So let's stop. I'm going to sing, and then I'm going to bring up Maya, and we're going to chat. This is the water of life, and this is the first poem in gold, which many of you know and probably could recite. Which some of you know, I think, some familiar faces. Sandy, you probably can recite it. Love, the water of life let love, the water of life flow through our veins. Let a love-drunk mirror steeped in the wine of dawn translate night. You who pour the wine, put the cup of oneness in my hand and let me drink from it till I can't imagine separation. Love, you are the archer. My mind is your prey. Carry my heart and make my existence your bullseye. ای عشق ای عشق خردم شکار تو تیر زدن شعار تو شست دلم به دست کن جان مرا نشانه کن آب حیات عشق را در رگ ما روانه کن روانه کن روانه کن. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here.
Everyone, we're so pleased you're here to celebrate. Can we give Haleh a round of applause for having the book out?
Thank you.
A book birthday is a very long anticipated thing, is it not?
Yes.
I was hoping you would begin just by sort of giving us just a little context on Rumi, the man and the writer, and how you came to fall in love with him and translate the work.
Mm-hmm. Rumi, the man, Maulana, the Persian, to call him, our sage, our master. Maulana Jalaluddin Muhammad ibn Hussein Balkhi is his name. And, he came to be known as Rumi. Later, Rum means of Anatolia, which is the region of which Turkey was a part. And so it also refers to more Western than Eastern. So he's been, he's come to be known as Rumi, though that is his name, Maulana. So in my household, we call him Maulana. I did consider, by the way, but, that's his name that he's known by. And I don't take it as a necessarily as a political issue. So I'll leave that aside for now. Let me just talk about Rumi. That's another story I could talk about another time. But let's talk about Rumi. He was born in present-day Afghanistan or present-day Tajikistan. There's a little question about that. At that time, there were no national boundaries. So why do we call him a Persian poet? Because he was writing in the language of Farsi, the language of Persian. Farsi, Persian, it's like saying Deutsch, German. So, but around 95% of his verses in Persian. So anyway, but then he traveled across the Middle East. He was the son of an Islamic theologian, grandfather theologian, and he was praying, fasting, doing the zikr ceremony from a very young age. He was considered very magnetic and charming from a very young age, very precocious, and he was really curious about everything. Not surprising, this personality, right? And then he, they traveled across the Middle East. The Mongols were invading Central Asia, so they were moving ahead of the Mongol invasion, but also initially the father wanted to leave because he didn't like the mosque that he was in. It was too small. He wanted to preach in a bigger mosque. And he was like, let's get out of here. So he wanted to move on. But also eventually they were essentially fleeing the Mongols also. Mixture, it wasn't, they weren't on their tail, but that was a definite concern. And then they landed in Konya. And there, his father was a very esteemed, revered preacher. Eventually, his father passed away. Eventually, he was, brought in, and he became first he said, no way. And he went to Damascus for 7 years to study more. And he said, I'm not ready for this. And I don't want you to call me Molana. Don't call me Molana. Don't call me your sage, your master. I don't want to, And he went, and apparently he did meet Shams in Damascus first. That's the story that's not known. But he went to Shams, and like many people, said, Shams, be my teacher. And Shams like, nah, I don't want to be your teacher. But eventually Maulana Rumi went back to Konya. He did take over his father's position. He was a preacher. He was very famous. Thousands would come to hear him. He was very charming and magnetic. And then around the age of 38, 39, he was like, I don't know about this. I'm at the apex of this career. I'm having a midlife crisis. There's got to be something more than this, right? And what does it mean to walk the talk? What is the deeper vein here? I'm not really tapping into the deeper vein. And I'm surrounded, as he felt, by people who were, obsessed with hierarchy, which was exactly antithetical to the philosophy. The philosophy was not about hierarchies. And it was like calling us to feel a presence that is deeper than that, And so he was like, these people are hypocrites. What am I doing? Anyway, then Shams, meanwhile, was elsewhere and was like, you know what? I think I do want a student now. I'm lonely. I'm 66, and I want a friend. I want to teach someone something. But I don't want any student. I want someone who's ready to fly. I want someone who's at the peak, and I could just push them, and they will fly. And he said, I think that just might be this guy, Maulana. He knew about him. And so he went to Konya, and they met. And then, boom, whoo, pow. And from a life of preaching to a life of poetry and music. And he started writing poetry and that. I could go on and on and on, but that's a good background.
That's a beautiful background, absolutely. And I think, again, you've chosen moments in his biography that are so transcendent in the literature, right, that come across so clearly. So how did he come into your life? Did you grow up listening to Rumi at home? What was your experience with him?
Yeah. My father was reciting him, and then my mother eventually too. But the first person I heard recite him was my father. And they had Shabbos Share, poetry gatherings, readings, and Rumi was read in the house, and Rumi was discussed till the wee hours of the morning, and I was a child on the fringes, not really understanding what they were talking about, and also not really caring because I wanted to be an American kid. And I was living in a material world, and I was a material girl. No, actually, I really wasn't. I was baffled by our culture, and I wondered what in the hell was going on. Why was the Hudson River so polluted? Why was it a toxic dump? And why was there all this warring? And my parents were not shy of speaking about war. My mom was painting. I put something online the other day of one of my mother's paintings. It was very clear that there was awareness of the wars and an awareness of actually a lot of the things that we're dealing with now that began then, that were brewing then and beginning then. And now we are really sowing or reaping. We're reaping what was sown. But anyway, that was all happening. And meanwhile, this poet was in the house. So what was going on in my mind, not knowing yet, but these two realities were weaving together, and I felt like one was talking to the other, which I discovered later. But do I think that Maulana Rumi speaks to our times and speaks to militarism, speaks to narcissism, speaks to obsessive consumerism? Yes, 100%. And I think that this poetry, one of the reasons I translate is I think it provides a philosophical underpinning for a new way of being and seeing. And I really believe that in a very serious way, because everything comes out of values. What are we valuing? That's all. It's not that hard to shift, but it's a cultural shift, and a culture shifts. A culture must shift. And then you see the changes 40 years down the line, or maybe 20 years, maybe 10 years. Maybe it happens fast. It better happen fast. It better happen real fast. After 40? 4. Yeah, 4, right,
yeah.
4. But so.
We're still
Yeah,
around, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think all of that's profoundly true. And I suppose, one of the questions, and perhaps we'll have time at the end, is sort of how is Rumi speaking to our time? But I think in part you're answering this. He's sort of always relevant, right?
I think so. Yeah.
So in your task as a translator, what were you interested in maybe recalibrating or correcting or revealing versus other past translations? Because, of course, you have an encyclopedic knowledge of other translators and their work. What was your particular channel and vehicle into this?
Yeah, I mean, the translator, and we were talking about this backstage, is that, the translator in this occasion has a lot of freedom of choice, because he didn't write like this one book with 40 poems. I'm going to go translate that book with 40 poems. No, he had thousands and thousands and thousands of poems, over 3,200 collected in one book, and then the Masnavi 6 volumes in another book. So as a translator, the first task is to choose which poems. And I picked the poems that would speak to me, speak to our times. I was interested in things too, like the poem in Gold about laughter that I never saw translated, or the line where he says, "Ey shah ish parvar monand shir madar, ey shah ish parvar monand shir madar berakhsa." He's saying, love-spreading king, nourishing as mother's milk. The idea of defining a king as an entity that's nourishing as mother's milk. This is a radical, beautiful way of defining masculinity. So I was interested in lines that would flip the script of some of our ways, and I was very interested in that. I mean, in Water, there's a poem where he says, "I wanted to be top dog, kingpin, bigger than big," and he's speaking to that in us, and he's saying, then he comes to a different conclusion, but this idea, again, of challenging hierarchical thinking was important to me. But not just that. There's love poems. There's 96 times love is named in this book. So all the different ways of defining love, thinking of love, how many ways can we conceive of love? This is very interesting to me, all of this stuff.
So in some ways, the book titles are headers, right? So you have Gold, and then Gold is played out thematically across the poems. How did you select, and I suppose you started answering this, but for Water, where do we see sort of the metaphysical energy of water coming into the book and into the poems?
Yeah, well, I think one of the main ways that he describes love is water of life. Hayat, the water of life. Because as I've said before, what waters the ground within us and between us? The water of life, love. What ensures that gardens grow? What ensures that gardens grow instead of battlegrounds? Love, really, right? So love is the water of life. So this water, very important. And then, it just comes back and around and around. Water, 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 water. He says, listen to the water. He just wants us to listen to the water. Listen to the babbling brook, That's.
It almost sounds like, he often begins with the egoic and then ends up in the transcendent by the end, right? And invites us to come along with that. Do you see his role as a preacher as being sort of central to his modus operandi on the page?
Yeah, I do. I don't think he ever stops being a preacher, and even more so in the Masnavi. I mean, this is Divan Shams.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Masnavi for those who aren't familiar with the
Yeah,
text?
yeah. So there's essentially two books of poetry. Divan Shams, which I translated from, except for one couplet in each book. Everything else is from Divan Shams, or Divan Shams. Then there's Masnavi, which is a 6-volume narrative, didactic folk stories, more sort of, he's storytelling in that one, and he's bringing in folk tales. He's bringing in the Quran a lot more in the Masnavi, making a lot of references to the Quran, making references to Persian folk tales, making references to different past inspirational poets of his, and it's more of a, it was sort of a book that he did when he was towards the end of the last chapter of his life. And it was, one of his disciples came to him and said, listen, you got to write a Masnavi. You got to do this. Give us the prescription. So he calls this book the root of religion, right? So it's a very different book than Divan Shams. Divan Shams is wild. Divan Shams, he's confessing his own struggle. Divan Shams, he's speaking from the voice of God. Divan Shams, he's talking to God. He's talking to us. He's talking to us all the time in Divan Shams. And he's relating to us more, I think, as a human, on a human level, not so much as a sage, although he is a sage in this book too. And he gives advice and tells us what to do all the time. But he also confesses, and he also plays a lot.
So does it feel like there's a more authoritative way? Like, is the stance a little more didactic?
Yes,
in
book?
Masnavi
is more didactic, definitely, yeah.
What is the trickiest part of translating Rumi?
Yeah, the trickiest part. Sometimes there's lines that are challenging, and you could sit with different Iranian people who know the language very well and argue about the meaning of it. Just like if someone were to sit with an Emily Dickinson poem and discuss, the people would have different interpretations of the poem. So sometimes there are lines that are more elusive than others. So what to do with that line, how to do right by that line, I think it's important to know the body of work. It's important to know the context in which, the cultural context. What does, I say this a lot, latif mean, right? That word is so important. But words like that, what are these very, very important words in Sufi thought? What do they mean? That is like what you use as your clues as you're dealing with elusive lines. And also sometimes he'll say something and then, this relates to that line. I will base my interpretation upon these two lines together, and so that happens. So I'd say that's the tricky part when you're dealing with an elusive line.
Yeah, but I like that there's a kind of intertext that happens, and then you can kind of illuminate it. Are there words in archaic Persian that you've come across that perhaps have a different definition now?
Yes.
So even as you're working with that line, you're like, wait, I suspect this means something else.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Like edrar. Edrar means right now, means urine. But it means wages.
Oof. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
So it also means, it means urine and wages. So which are you going to pick? Clearly he meant wages. And it's very interesting the moment that he brings that in, because he's asking us, what's the line? Well, miser. He says, say miser's rule. Generosity fades from memory. Royal in rank, royal heart. No, that's a different part of it. He says, say miser's rule. Generosity fades from memory. What wage will you play? What clothes will you offer the stripped and bare? So he's definitely not saying what urine will you. You know what I mean?
As far as we know.
Yeah, he's definitely not.
How, because you're a poet yourself, how has sitting with Rumi for as long as you have now informed your own practice as a writer?
I'd say more than anything, and easier for me to say, is it's informed my life, my feelings as a human walking around the streets of New York and the streets of this globe and the forests and meadows of this globe. I feel nourished by Rumi's words. I have repeated his words so many times. And, I believe in the power of words deeply. And this experience of translating has shown me that mantras, that visualizing certain things, that saying and repeating certain lines. I don't do it consciously and say, I'm going to repeat this line and then I'm going to feel something. I've just been doing it since 2016 specifically, with these translations, and they've deeply impacted the way that I feel. I'm much, 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 much more relaxed. I mean, and I'm pretty relaxed.
I do. She's pretty relaxed. What would Rumi do? What do we do now? What would Rumi do about this age? What would he advise us?
Oh, this time that we're in? Oh, well. God. Well, first of all, there's a phrase called nafs amare. Nafs amare. Nafs amare is the uncooked ego. It's the narcissist, it's the imperious ego, it's the one that's lusting for dominion, it's the one that greed, hoard. It's a part of us that needs to mature. And it's not a part of us that should be leading millions of people. That's what he would say, first of all. And he would be like, humans, when are you going to crack this code? We had Genghis Khan when I was around 800 years ago. Didn't we play this already? How many times are we going to play this out? And how is there not a protocol? Right. Why do we have a rule that says you have to be over 35 years old to be the president, but you don't have to be, you don't have to have a narcissism check? How come? How come? That doesn't make any sense. And, to educate ourselves to be able to say with deep and profound ease, yes, we know there is nafsa amara. We know there is imperious ego within us all, and yet amplified in certain people. And the people that it's amplified in, the conundrum, the paradox is that, well, they love power. And so then they take the reins. But it's not just nafs amara, then it goes a little further, nafs shaitani, which is the devilish nafs, which is even a little worse than nafs amara. And there was a whole bunch of psychiatrists that did a book on Trump, and they said that he's a kind of an evil guy. Guys, wake up, So it's like, why do we do this? That's the part that I just don't understand. The anchor people talk about everything. Everybody talks about this as normal, as if this is normal, and normalizing it in conversation. We don't need to normalize this. It's not normal. But I mean, it's happened through history. But does it always have to happen? Anyway, he would be like, let's crack this code. Come on. He'd be like, come on, people. We got it,
I think we need a round of applause for that. And in some ways, he provides an alternative, right? Like the idea of being cooked by love, being made cooked in love's flames, right? The idea of there being an alternative, and that he pokes fun at us in a way, and he's included.
Does.
So
he's included in that.
That's the thing. It's like the welcoming that you never feel you're being talked down to by Rumi. You feel like if anyone's going to get through to anyone, it's going to be Rumi, right?
Yes.
It's someone who is saying, "I'm with you in this. I've been there, done that." But there's a way out of suffering. Pain may not be optional, but suffering is, right? There's a way out of this.
Yes.
Haleh, thank you so much.
You're
this has
welcome.
been an absolute pleasure.
Oh,
I know we're going to turn it to the audience now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here.
I don't know if we have a circling mic, but I'm presuming we have a circling mic. Do we have a circulating mic?
We have them coming up.
Okay, brilliant. Okay.
Just keep your hands
I'm
raised.
going to sit down so I can enjoy from the audience.
Thank you so much, Maya. Thank you. Thank you so much. And Maya's poem, by the way, was just in the New Yorker. Just, 6 days ago? 2 days ago? 2 days ago? No, a few days ago. Yeah. Oh, yes. So check out her work. Yes. You have a mic.
Beautiful.
Okay, she's
Thank
got the
you.
mic. Then you get the mic, yeah.
Would you say, in your estimation, was Rumi a feminist?
I would say a humanist. I mean, I definitely believe that Rumi. I mean, what is a let me define feminist, and humanist for me. I mean, um, I would say I'm a feminist. I would say I'm a humanist. I would say I'm an animalist, an earthist. I would say I'm a living beingist. I want living beings to be well. I think Rumi wanted living beings to be well. And I think he was also living in a time where there was gender apartheid to an extent. I mean, we don't even hear much about the women in his life. We know little bits. So I don't know, but I know that he did speak very highly of women in certain passages, very highly of women. And he loved life. He loved all, and he wanted us to be well. And if we call the divine feminine the part of us that cares and takes care and is nourishing as mother's milk, then yes, he would say, bring on the divine feminine. If we call that the part of us that loves and cares and is nourishing as mother's milk and exists in all of us, the divine feminine exists in all of us, we can call it the divine feminine, we can call it anything. We call it the characteristics that it is. So yes, I think that answers yes. I would say yes. I would say yes. I mean, I don't know. I don't like putting labels on things. There's so much misogyny in the world. Misogyny has been such a universal, and it's crushed the divine feminine within women and men and non-binary and trans all. It has crushed the divine feminine, and if that's what it means to feel sensitive and care, if that's human. I say that's human, and I say it's also in geese. I was down by the river, and the geese were talking. And I was like, what are they saying? God, I wish I could take a class in goose language, because they were definitely chatting about all kinds of things. And so the love is in them too, Yes.
Hi, greetings, Haleh. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing. This is just so beautiful. I fell in love with the words of Rumi on social media, like through seeing social media posts. I was like, wow, this is so contemplative.
Oh, good.
I just started reading the ebook, and I noticed in the introduction, I think you mentioned that the word love appears 96 times in the whole
In the book, yeah.
in the book, and it made me think about learning about the four loves from C.S. Lewis, with charity and friendship, romantic love, erotic love.
Yes.
And I guess I just wanted to ask, I've been trying to formulate this question all day, so bear with me.
Yeah.
Where do you see that revolutionary, transcendental, divine love that Rumi speaks of that transcends carnality? Where do you see that show up in this era?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, where does it show up in this era? It's got to show up more. It does show up in poetry. It shows up, I think, in when people take care of each other, when people stand in solidarity with each other, when people show up and fight for the rivers and the waters. It shows up there. It shows up when we gather and help each other out. It shows up there. Oh, yes.
Hi. My friend and I were reading Gold ahead of coming here tonight, and I was very interested in how you were talking about the ghazal in the introduction. So I wanted to sort of ask you about that, and that, now correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of it is it started in Farsi, in Persian, and then moved into Arabic, and eventually, you know, well, it did get to English, but
It
that's
did get to English.
yeah, that's
Mhm.
and I know Aga Shahed Ali
That's
was
right.
yeah. So could you just kind of talk about that sort of journey from, you know, all the way, because English wasn't around, you know, in the time of Rumi, and you know, I'm going through here and looking for the refrains, and it's, you know, it's great, but it must be, I mean, the translation is with the rhyme. I mean, can you even translate the rhymes? You know what I mean? It must be anyway. That if you could just
Yeah, speak of sort of the ghazal form and a little bit about the ghazal. The ghazal, by the way, everyone is, you know, a series of couplets. There's a refrain, and the refrain is at the end. So of each couplet, and each couplet stands on its own. You could pull out a couplet, and it could be a poem. They each stand on their own. They're like beads on a necklace, or as I sometimes say, a series of tweets. You know, but they're the thread is the refrain, and it's at the end of each couplet. So it has a whirling quality. And now Rumi was composing while whirling, so you could imagine that he was going آمدین بهار جانهای شاخ تر به رقصا از پا و سر بریدی بی پا و سر به رقصا پایان جنگ آمد آواز چنگ آمد آنجا قباچه باشد ای خوش کمر به رقصا, you know, به رقصا به رقصا, you know, that he would come back to the refrain maybe at the same point he was composing while whirling. That said, what happens in translation? I don't always keep the refrain at the end because in English it's not always served. Sometimes I do. Sometimes you'll feel the refrain at the end, but in most cases I allow the refrain to slink through. Also, sometimes the refrain is rhyming. It's not actually the same word, but it's a rhyme. And so when you translate it into English, there isn't a rhyme. You know, like in one poem, it's like a piece of cantaloupe, a spool of thread, sour grapes, and salt, dry land. If I were to try to rhyme those four things, you know, why? I mean, boy, would I be doing some acrobatic tricks, and I would be compromising meaning, and I would be making an awkward poem. So I do not attempt to rhyme. I do not. I feel much better about trying to really give myself over to the meaning and the image and give you the image. And then what happens is you feel even more leaps between the couplets. So the ghazal, the word is etymologically related to gazelle, leap. So between the couplets, there's a leap, you know, because as I said, they stand independently. So it's not a narrative, it's not like a sonnet. And so those leaps are quite fun. And then even in the translation, sometimes the leaps are even more apparent because there isn't the rhyme that's holding it together, you know, and that sort of bodes well in contemporary American verse. We like leaps. Yes.
If you must choose, if you must say one line among thousands,
Oh boy.
what would it be? Is there a line that sums up Rumi's philosophy and everything? And what is your personal favorite? And forgive me if these questions sound like blasphemy.
And wait, what was the last thing you said? Very last thing?
Thing that I said?
Yeah.
I said, forgive me if these questions sound like blasphemy.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. No, not at all. No, it's an interesting question. It's a hard question because there's so many. But right now I'm thinking, I do like that line in the poem, you are the treasure, you know, hear this truth. You are the treasure and the veil hiding it. You know, I think that's a really helpful, you know, good line to carry with you. And that's one, right, that's coming to mind. As many of you know, I love rare king, true king, nourishing as mother's milk, come and dance. I love that line, and I feel it's useful. And when someone told me that they'd speak about that line in a men's group, I was like, yes, speak about that line. Speak about that line for months. You know? So anyway, Those are two. Thank you. Yeah.
I think we have time for just two more. So.
Thank you so much again for always sharing Rumi so beautifully.
Thank you.
And so my question would be, in what do you believe your translation differs from what's been done into English, roughly, or so far, in what it is different? And also, and lastly, if you look at the translations like right before the book goes to either in the proof stage or at some point, if you glance at any other translations from the original, of course, into English.
Right. Oh, so the question was,
in what way do you believe your translation is
different
from what's
right.
been done?
And do I look at the other ones? Yeah.
Or at any
point
into English?
Into English, yeah. Yeah. So, well, yeah. I mean, the best way to to show one how different, vastly different they are, right, is to A/B them, right, to have them side by side. And I do that sometimes in classes and sessions. I'll bring one of my translations and Coleman Barks's version or someone else's version, put them side by side, so you can see the vast differences. In the introduction of Gold, there is a paragraph that shows the very, very clear difference between one couplet, and it is astonishing how different that couplet is and how important that couplet is. But endless differences, and also differences between which poems we choose and also which couplets within the ghazal do we choose, because it is a tradition even among Persian editors to take out the couplets they like. Even when they're putting a anthology of Rumi, they're picking their favorite couplets a lot of the time. So they're not necessarily doing the whole poem. As I said, the ghazal invites you to pull out sometimes because they each stand on their own. So which collection of couplets does a translator choose? Very much reflective of the psyche of the writer, right? What time they're living in, what culture they've grown up in. And so, yeah, so there's a lot of differences, and the best way would be, you could look at the intro of Gold, but also in classes I'll be at the Academy of American Poets doing online Rumi in May, and so on. But no, there's a difference. And do I look at the other translations? I do. I'm curious about them. I'm always curious. What did this person? How did this person see this line? Yeah, it does interest me. I try not to do it before I start the translation process, because I don't want it necessarily to influence me. But it's interesting,
All right, one more in the back.
Salam, Haleh.
Salam.
I know you mentioned that growing up you listened to Rumi and that was something that influenced you, but I'm curious if there's something else that speaks to you about Rumi that draws you towards his poems rather than Hafez or Saadi or all the great poems from Iran and the Persian region.
Yeah, I mean, there's a possibility that I might someday, enter the territory of Hafez. I'm not sure yet. I'm with Rumi now, and I don't know, it's just like he's my pal. It's just he's my buddy, I'm loyal to my friend, and that's where I've been. Although I'm curious about I would love also to find contemporary Iranian poets that I absolutely love and translate them. And, I haven't necessarily taken on the task of searching, and there are some that I very much like, but of course, but yeah, that would be interesting. So anyway, I'm not like, I'm not a monogamous in this case, but I'm very loyal. And so I don't know, it's something mystical, metaphysical, it's some kind of emotional, I don't know. We've been hanging out. Well, yeah, I want to sincerely thank you all for being here and for your attention and presence. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I'm glad you were here. And thank you, Maya C. Popa, for being with me. And thank you, Jackie, for pulling this all together and thinking of this, and everyone at New York Public Library. We'll be out there. I'll be signing books. And also, if you're around May 4th, I will have musicians, and we'll be doing something quite different in that there will be a lot of music and singing of these lyrics and also recitation. So that's at Joe's Pub. That's our official launch party, May 4th. So anyway, maybe we'll see some of you there. Thank you.